All right, welcome everybody to my final lesson at the Flatiron School, Caste Culture and Violence. All right, so this is kind of a bookend for the first day talk. So, since I doubt everybody remembers the first day talk, I have it handy. Pull it up. All right, so we talked a bit about education stuff. We talked a bit about um, boot camp kind of stuff. We talked about culture stuff. So when I was doing that, I was really trying to sell you on an idea that probably was a little uncomfortable, probably a little unfamiliar. I needed to get you to drink the Kool-Aid. So now that you've swam in a Kool-Aid hot tub a little bit, I want to tell you a little bit more about um, some of the underlying philosophy on these things. So we're going to talk about education stuff. We're going to talk about some business stuff, and we're going to talk about some tech stuff. So a lot of the difference between uh, traditional education, traditional workplaces, and what we did here in Denver is control. There's a lot of coercion that we tolerate in our lives. People trying to force us to do things. And that can be, well, I have to do it because the boss said so. That could be, we got to drive faster if we're going to make it to Atlanta by Thursday. Why do we need to make it to Atlanta by Thursday? I don't know. That's what we said we were going to do. Could be, you got to do well in elementary school, so you get to go to middle school, so you get to go to high school, so you get to go to college, so you get to have a job. And that's what we tell the 9-year-olds. Like, for which job do they need to do all these things? Whatever, we twist their arm on it. We try to get good grades in school. Try to get a good performance review at work. All these are like levers that people use on us, often kind of against our own best interests. So I think that one of the reasons that this happens is it makes us really comfortable. Even when we don't like what we're trying to be coerced into, this dynamic of someone being in charge, it's either something that we like, or even if it's something that we don't like, it's familiar. We can rebel against it, but it's still there. The idea that we might be powerful, that we might be actually free, that's fucking terrifying, because then it's not anybody else's fault. We only have ourselves to disappoint when we do that. And that's a pretty heavy burden, and it's not one that I think that we necessarily get well prepared for. One of the things that I've noticed, so I've had 18 cohorts, 763 students over the last 6 years. And one of the things that I noticed pretty early on with first project in school is a lot of people will go, I'm not creative. I don't have ideas for projects. I'm not a creative person. And it's been one of the biggest joys of this job, seeing people rediscover their creativity. Because if you talk to a 7-year-old, there are no uncreative 7-year-olds. So like logically, we can conclude that that's something that just gets beaten out of us throughout childhood, throughout adulthood, is not thinking of yourself as a creative person with ideas. And even like if you don't have talent or skills, that doesn't stop the 7-year-olds. And once you're in the right kind of environment, it doesn't stop grown-ups either. And all of a sudden, everything becomes fun again. Everything becomes a little adventure that you're on. And that's fucking wild. So like let's talk a little bit more about that education thing. And for any of the teachers on, there are no learning objectives from this. There's no facts that you're going to take out of what we're talking about today. This is a thing that I want you to feel. We're not talking about facts in this. We're talking about truth in this. And we're going to make a distinction between those two things. But just buckle up. We'll chat a little bit too. But open up your heart a little bit. We're gonna explore some stuff together. So education, like you think about why you learn to not be creative in school, like the things that caused you to over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what started making you feel that way. And it's usually things like, uh, so like, why not creative? Well, because like that didn't get you enough points. Why did you need the points? Well, you needed the points because that's what was going to get you into the next grade. That's what was going to get you not a nasty note sent home to your parents. Um, that it wasn't required. The things that we needed to do to win school, well, we didn't have to do those. So, and then you see other people who are creative and you go, oh shit, that's what that's supposed to look like? It doesn't look like that when I do it. And so you gradually learn that you're not a creative person. You're maybe pretty good at following instructions, maybe pretty good at following rules, but this is getting to that hierarchical relationship between teachers and students, between managers and employees. And I think it's a fucking tragedy because we start getting trained to wait for a grown-up to tell us what to do, and then to dole out tasks, and then to tell us whether or not we did the tasks right. And one of the things that I wanted to do with these kinds of programs is break that fucking wheel, because that's not what education is. That's indoctrination, maybe, but it's certainly not learning anything, and it's definitely not cultivating a relationship with knowledge and the excitement of discovering things. Um, there's there's two kinds of motivation. There's intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, these are the things we want to do on our own. Extrinsic motivation is stuff that other people need to reward, punish us, whatever. And there's kind of an interesting thing that happens with intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Even if you come into something intrinsically motivated, if you are also extrinsically rewarded for it, over time, it extinguishes the intrinsic motivation. And that's what happens to all of us throughout school. Even topics that you legitimately have some interest in, that you want to explore. Well, we're not there to explore. We're there to get points. We're there to get good grades. We're there to go from first grade to second grade to third grade to 34th grade. And that's a fucking shame, because that carries us into our adulthoods. That carries us into the jobs and careers and stuff that we choose, where we're not even expecting to be intrinsically motivated anymore. All we're looking for is to not get in trouble, or like in the best case scenario, to win. And that starts at just such an early age. And this is like the cruelest prank of the entire thing. You guys have I think everybody on this call probably knows my feelings about higher education, college, and what have you. It's actually worse than that. So I stand by all the things that I've said about college, but they also apply to basically all secondary school too. So like high school and middle school are about as worthless. So here's some evidence of that. School cannot be like whatever you know, whatever your interests are, like whoever you are now, school can't be responsible for more than 100% of that. So it's probably a mix of school, it's a mix of your parents, just things that you did all on your own, like all the things you know, or some balance of those things. And so none of them can be responsible for more than 100% of what you are, like least of all school. So, like high school dropouts and high school graduates, if that's all the education you have, functionally illiterate, functionally enumerate, like kind of across the board. What do you go like, well, yeah, of course. Of course, what? That's 9 to 12 fucking years of school. And that's what we have to show for it. That's fucked up. You think about how much math you expect that like someone with just a high school education can do. Like, all right, well, like maybe they know their times tables, maybe. Arithmetic, maybe like y equals mx plus b, like style algebra stuff, if you're lucky. 12 years! You studied that shit for 12 years. You can't get out of 6th grade without completing a square or like refactoring polynomials. Look at my program RAS. Factoring polynomials. Can you do that shit now? Could you do that stuff the day after the test? So much of those things that we do in school, what was even the desired outcome of that? And I think that there's a more insidious problem with that. It gets us used to this kind of double speak around what our goals are, what winning is. I was just talking with somebody earlier today, complaining about something at work. And they're like, nobody will actually just look at the problem. We're going to make an action committee. We're very concerned about whose department's fault that is. Where somebody came up with an idea that in no way addresses the actual problem at hand. Is there any fucking wonder how that happened? That's, hey, this group project we did is an utter piece of trash, but I did my part, right? So I get full credit, even though I really had to kind of carry my teammates a little bit. Think about all of the things in your business life, in your work that you've seen, where it's like, this doesn't make any goddamn sense. Why are we doing this? That is 9, 12, 16, 20 years of training on saying that something is important, saying that this is going to be an outcome, saying that you know something, when everybody kind of knows it's not true. But you get your points and you move on, and that matters. That's part of education. And like, that's a fucking travesty. And it's one of the things that we were trying to do differently here. That's what was behind all of this stuff. Because knowledge, truth, growth, these things are cool. And we'll talk about all the ways that they're cool, like in a second. But there's so much unlearning you have to do about what the point of all this shit is, and what actually learning something means, and what that process means, and how much of yourself it takes. They're like, something that warms my heart in these programs is when somebody gets some amount through the school, and then goes, oh, you know what? I fucking hate programming. I don't want to do this. And then they go off and do something else. So if the cost of that is like a non-trivial amount of money, $7,000, $10,000, whatever, even if it's the whole 15, $20,000, whatever. And what, 6 weeks of your life, 10 weeks of your life, 15, 24 when we were doing the 6-month programs. You imagine how heartbreaking it is when you go to school for 12 years, and another 4 for college, another 2 for master's degree, another 2 or 3 a PhD, and you start doing your work and you're like, oh, I don't like this at all. Programming is not for everyone, man. Like, if it doesn't turn your gears now, like, it's probably not going to later. But that's like just finishing the class so that we say that we got the piece of paper, so that we can earn the right to get the next piece of paper. We break rocks to earn the right to break bigger rocks. That's not that's not what we're here for. That's not the purpose of education. So I want to talk one more like hit piece on education as we kind of know it. There's a history behind this. So traditional education comes from 17th century Prussia, which is like kind of proto-Germany. So the Prussians were looking for two goals. One of them, like at least noble sounding, the other one extremely not. They were looking to create a more productive working class. That was the noble goal. The slightly less noble goal is they wanted a propaganda machine that they could use to indoctrinate people to all the things that I was just talking about. Make them more pliant as employees, make them more dutiful as subjects of the state. This is actually how they sold it to the aristocrats, because the aristocrats are like, all right, so you want to like empower our underclass. I don't understand how we benefit from that at all. And so the sales pitch was like, but think about how much easier it'll be to control them. Like this is the sales pitch. So they do it, and it kind of works on both fronts. Very successful. So in the 19th century, in America, a dude named Horace Mann takes a trip out to Prussia and sees this and goes, damn, this might help our like rural farmer population also like participate in this new industrial revolution that's in its kind of infancy right now. And he's like, but we'll take out the authoritarian kind of bits of it. So like that didn't quite make it into Horace Mann's version, but it was still about command and control. And it was still one of the like structural purposes of how the Prussian system works, which you're familiar with. It's grades, it's teachers in classes of like 25 people or so. It's like kind of a elementary school, middle school, high school. Like it would be very even now. And part of the like structure, the goal of structuring it that way is that you could wash people out, because they're also trying to keep an eye out for people that might be good scientists and inventors and like and that sort of stuff. But and like you're like well, I mean that's kind of what we have now, and like you're right, except that's very much trying to like lock people into these like class identities. It's like well, sorry, 16-year-old, turns out you're not smart enough to do real work, so that's fine. Like it was a little bit of investment. It didn't pan out for the state, so you just go off to the factories. And that's still happening. It's even worse in like modern day Prussia. Like the German system around this is very much like your fate kind of gets decided as a teenager. But if we're like really embracing our freedom and our power, we don't have to do any of that. We have a lot of control, or control is the wrong word. We'll talk about more about that in a sec. But we have a lot of power for our entire lives over what we choose to engage in. So some other thoughts about education that we tried to do differently here in Denver. There's this kind of, like this is increasingly the case, and it even kind of sounds good on paper. This like kind of agnostic approach to education, we're primarily concerned about facts. And like that sounds fine, sounds good. But think about yourself. They're facts about you. If somebody understood an arbitrary number of facts about you, would they understand who you are? I would dare to say not. Somebody who's hung out with you a few times, they might have a more decent sense of who you are than somebody that could recite a bunch of facts about you. So this is this break I'm going to make between truth and fact. We wanted to be a little bit more concerned about truth, even at the cost of facts sometimes. Facts are only useful in as much as they get us a little bit closer to truth. This is what pragmatism is all about. And we're going to revisit pragmatism in a little bit also. But facts, science, these don't mirror reality in any kind of like useful way. They're a lens. And I think we were actually a little bit better 100 years ago at acknowledging that limitation, that we are putting a useful lens on reality in pursuit of some goal. We did the same thing in this program. Lots of other programs that are crammed full of more facts. Can't make software though. That's facts versus truth. There is a real you and there is a real world. Both of them can kind of only be understood in contexts, in relationships. It was actually borne out by modern science also. This is like one of our takeaways from quantum mechanics, is that when you observe something, like you become involved with it. It's the same thing in these programs. As soon as we start interacting with each other, that's where the truth starts coming from. Because we're in a context. We can't divorce facts. We can't divorce truth from context. It needs to be done in a relationship. It's like one of the benchmarks that we use for that in education is your classroom a pedagogical convenience, or does it actually require the classroom? Are you teaching 20 disconnected people? Could you just as easily do this with 20 one-on-ones? Or is your community necessary? I would wager that those of you who've done this program would have said before this, fuck it. What do I need the community for? I mean, I'm not mad about it, but I understand how that becomes a critical part of education. Now that you've been on the other side of this, my hope would be that you see how absolutely critical that is for education. And that's a thing that we were robbed of in K through 35 education. There's another thing that is really disturbing once you start picking at this a little bit, and we call it the violence of education. This is another thing. This is a hidden curriculum. This isn't something that anybody overtly designed into this, but it's true. The violence of education is that the reason that we're acquiring this knowledge, that we're acquiring these skills, is to dominate, to control, to reshape everything how we see fit. Reading. So this is from someone who worked on the Manhattan Project, making the nuclear weapon. I've felt it myself, the glitter of nuclear weapons. It's irresistible if you come to them as a scientist, to feel it's there in your hands, to release the energy that fuels the stars, to let it do your bidding, to perform these miracles, to lift 1 million tons of rock into the sky. It's something that gives people an illusion of illimitable power, and it is, in some ways, responsible for all our troubles. This is what you might call technical arrogance that overcomes people when they see what they can do with their minds. That's the other danger of this. What we want out of education is something that brings us together, that helps us understand the truth more. Not so that we can impose some distortion that we have on the world. From that same book, there's an idea that's jarring. You ask people, what do you think the future of the world? It's going to hell in a handbasket. There's another mass shooting. We're in this pandemic. Things just seem to be getting worse and worse and worse every fucking day. You ask a student in school, How about you? How about your future? You go, oh man, I think I'm actually going to do great. I'm going to get a job as a software engineer, so I'm going to be rich now. And like all of these things, everything's going up for you, everything's going down for the world. That is a violent relationship to have with the world. Instead, what we want to have is the world wants to be understood. Don't you? There's this essential unity. It's all one thing. There are no academic topics, no science that's different from literature, that's different from history, that's different from anything else. These are all angles on kind of the same fundamental truth. And the more we explore these things, the more we find ways to bring all of that back together, to bring each other together. This is just a fucking programming school. And you think about how much better the relationships that you have with other people now, all the new perspectives you have. That's not accidental. That's the point. And now that we have these skills, you think about all the different ways we can help each other, the ways that we can realize our purpose. There's I think that everybody has a calling, has a purpose. And as we develop these skills, it helps us chase our purpose more effectively. And we can use these skills that we've developed to help other people with their purpose also. All right, so that's what I have to say about education. I'm going to dovetail that into business stuff. But before I move on, please, questions, thoughts, what's on your mind?
Kyle, I think most of us in the room, we probably all largely agree with what you're saying. Could you share some thoughts on, you've described the why, but, how do you change any of this shit when, there's this industry around, making sure it continues?
Sure. So to steal my own conclusion a little bit, probably the most practical way that you can affect this change is just assume that it's already there. That's really all we did at Flatiron. It's all we did at Galvanize. We assumed that we were in the world that we wanted to exist. And when it pushed back, we pushed back too. And we didn't win every one. I would say that we also didn't even win the long game. In the meantime, 264 people got their lives changed. It's better than nothing. And that's also now 763 people that have seen a different way that it could be. Are every single one of them going to honor that in everything they do for the rest of their lives? Probably not. But maybe a few of them do. Maybe more than a few of them do. And I think that that's how these things spread. Good question.
Kyle, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's been ages, and I hope you're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious as to, a lot of what you said really resonated with me in terms of getting my creativity beat out of me, so to speak, and then rediscovering it. And you brought up a couple of weeks ago about bright spots.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of curious, do you have any advice for folks who are trying to find their creative seeds?
Sure.
And how, you don't know us, but how do we find our bright spots? Or how can we learn to refocus on those bright spots?
So there's an excellent book that I just read called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And the thesis of the book is that we spend too much time trying to, shoot, I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase this. Too much time trying to figure out what our passion is. And I'm going to differentiate that from our calling. It's slightly different. But figure out what your passion is, and then you just run after it with abandon. And what the book argues you do instead is you build career capital. So career capital is, what is a useful thing that I can do? And then you do that. And then that opens another door. And so you walk through that door. And then you walk through another door. And then all of a sudden, 5, 6, 7, 8, 100 doors later, you find yourself having exactly the life that you want to have. So I think it can be very, very stunting to try to know what the 100th door will be before you've gone through the first one. And the good news is you don't have to. This is real agility, is what's something that I feel drawn to, that is interesting to me, that I can help with right now, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, just right now. And you do it. And maybe one of the things you take out of it is like, okay, I never want to do the following 3 things again, but you know what? I was really not expecting to like milking cows that much, and I kind of like it. So shit, is there anything I can do with that plus these other things that I have? And when you start looking for those doors that open, that's how you craft a life. That's how you discern your calling. And I'm going to talk about callings a little bit more in a sec, but I think that's another one of the problems that happen when you try to take on too much of this at once, is you're trying to impose a calling on yourself. Like some idealized version of how you think of yourself, how you imagine your life playing out. Callings don't work that way. Like, you already have it. You need to discover what it is. And there's a pretty good chance that your friends already know it, or at least like what the next thing is. And so in a lot of ways, like if you want to find out what your bright spots are, like ask the people that love you. They know like what you rock at. They probably know it better than you do. But that's critical. Like your calling has to be discerned. You can't give yourself a calling.
Kyle, you talk about like about truth being somewhere in this joining of facts in context.
Yeah.
And that it's not, it can't just be facts. It's got to be in the context of whatever it is.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate in a world that seems, at least from my point of view, that seems increasingly more scary, in that whether it's media or social media or whatever, that just wants to either label people or put people in boxes and say, this is what you are, black and white. There's no nuance. There's no whatever.
Sure. So I think another thing that is unfortunately done to us in the process of being educated is we stop being able to see things as they are. So like I mentioned that a little bit earlier with like, this project didn't get done well, but everybody has a plausible reason for why they did their job. So it's a similar thing with ourselves and how we view ourselves and how we view the world. Even if the world is trying to impose a distorted view of you, something that isn't true, this is a muscle we have to start practicing. And one of the, like my practical recommendations for how you can start doing this is toward the start of the pandemic, I started practicing Stoicism, which is like, it's an ancient philosophy. It's a little bit different than like the common English word to be stoic. But it is largely about how we divorce our emotional attachments to particular outcomes and instead try to see an underlying truth. And it's a difficult thing to do. And so there's a book I do every day. It's called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. And there's a accompanying journal that goes along with it that helps coach through some of that stuff. So it doesn't make them go away, but it does help you change your relationship with those things. One of the things, it's kind of a theme of this talk overall, is that we don't control outcomes. We don't control other people's perceptions. We don't really control anything except our reasoned choice. And so breaking our emotional attachment to control over the external stuff, like that's job number one for that.
Kyle, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, it seems like the educational system has like a set of values.
Yeah.
That doesn't, bring us closer to the truth, doesn't help us self-actualize, doesn't make us happier, and so on, right?
Yeah.
But this system of values is largely reflected in the post-educational world too, right?
Yes.
Specifically, when we get jobs and so forth, which I'm sure is the next part that you're going to talk about.
Yep.
But at no point in the educational system does it seem like the issue is that I don't have the right attitude towards my education, and that like I can do something to change the material course of that, right? Like I can do things that would make my education more successful, make myself more creative or whatever.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I still need to follow the directions, tolerate boredom, do the thing, right? So I guess like, with this knowledge, with this understanding of, like the nature of things and a kind of like reorientation, like how do we, like, I guess I'm not trying to say like that it's inescapable, right? But like where does like personal agency or personal decision making come into this, right? Like I'm going to go get a job. My company is still going to just tell me to follow directions, right? So like where does like my agency come into this?
Absolutely. And like great tee up for this next part. So first thing, you don't have to do anything. You want to have a job. Cool. Like which job, in which city, in which country? Like, all right, so this is a good time to go to this one. So I'm just going to leave this up on the screen. Take a second to read it because I think it's relevant to this.
Kyle, can you make that a little bit bigger?
Oh, yeah. The fundamental nature of this kind of coercive thing that happens to us is we forget that we don't have to live in nice houses in the city. We don't have to have cars. You might choose to. I choose to. I like my nice house. I don't like my car, but all of these things are choices that we make. And so then you go, all right, but I do want those things. Okay, well, do you have to work a shitty job? Well, no, but it's so hard to find a good job. These are choices that you make. Every single one of these things. You can't make your boss not an asshole, but you do choose whether or not you're there. Do I? How will I pay rent otherwise? Rent's a lot cheaper in Nebraska. Rent's a lot cheaper in Malaysia. As soon as like you start looking at everything as a possibility, that you don't have to elementary, middle, high school, college, job. Now we see that we have a lot of choice. And now if you choose to work at that job where you got to follow orders and do all this sort of stuff, you're at least aware that you're making a choice. It's not being done at you. You're choosing to be there. And at any point, you can choose to not be there. So that like kind of leads into how this stuff that we learned, this dominance and control with education, how we bring that with us into our work. And so we put up with it. And one of the reasons we put up with it, so I've talked about callings. Well, there's two other relationships that we could have with work. So if calling is one of them, another one is career, another one's job. So I think that there's a lot of people in school who do what they're told to do and don't put up too much of a fuss because they just want to be left the fuck alone. Hey, if I do this, they don't make too much trouble for me, and then I can spend this third of my life that I've kind of like carved out for myself, and I can use that to do what I want. And then they do the same thing in jobs. They go, oh yeah, like I sure hate every waking minute of my job, but if I don't think about it very hard at all, I can withstand it and nobody messes with me too much. And then when I get home, I can do whatever I want for 3 hours. That's just like job relationship with work. The career relationship with work is a little more engaged, at least, but that violence starts coming back because this is, I hate how I am dominated. I want to move up so that I can dominate other people. And really, like, that might be a more satisfying way to make it through your day, but it still ultimately isn't searching out truth. It's, I'm tired of having other people impose their distortions on me. I want to impose my distortions on other people. I want to be in control. But you're never in control of outcomes. Impossible. Think about all the people who were in control and then the quarantine happened. Oops, turns out you weren't in control at all. Womp womp. It's an illusion. It's always been an illusion. And the hey, I'm looking for my control notes. We believe that we can control how long it takes to get through second grade. That's going to take a year. We know when this project is going to be done. This project is going to be done in 52 days. I charted it all out on my Gantt chart. Those are just distortions. They're facts. They're not truth. When you're working a calling, that's different. This is, I love this problem, and I want to find the best solution to it possible. That's what I've been lucky enough to have on my team here at Flatiron and at Galvanize. It was, what can we do to best prepare these people to change their own lives? And once you get out of the mindset of like, I got to get a good performance review. Oh, I got to like do what the boss says. You know, no, I'm chasing my calling right now. And the most effective way I can chase the calling is to not do high stakes assessments where everybody sits in a room for an hour and there's a minder and a little counter down from an hour. And then at the end of it, pencils down. I had a conversation once with somebody who was like, I noticed a student had headphones during their test. They could have programmed cheating. Like, what the fuck? What like terror have we inflicted on ourselves with this? That's not helping anybody be better prepared for work. Instead, what if we change the relationship with these code challenges? What if this is just an opportunity to check in an authentic context and learn something, learn what we still have yet to do. And oh boy, did we get in trouble for that. Didn't stop us though. We changed mod 2, we changed mod 3. It was going to better prepare you for work. Oh, you. It actually didn't stop us though. And to some extent, nor should they have. The mission of Flatiron for almost the entire run I was here was to enable the pursuit of a better life through education. Cool. What the fuck do you think we were trying to do? How are you going to argue with that? Turn that back around on them. I'm sorry, I'm pursuing the mission right now. You're not doing what you're told. All right, well, fire me. And the thing is, if you do that enough times, like somebody will call your bluff sooner or later. The other 99 times, they go like, all right, well, try not to make any more trouble in the future. All right. And so one of the most important lessons that I've learned in business is you need to go into every single day prepared to be fired, like emotionally prepared to be fired. And like super helps if as you go into these new careers, if you're also financially prepared to be fired. And because like that's another external thing that you don't control, whether or not you have a job tomorrow. This is actually my Stoic reading from this morning, was that's in the arc of possibilities. And if you've thought about what you'll do if that happens, if it does actually happen, well, it's not scary anymore. It might still suck, but it's not a thing that you act in fear of. And there's so many people that don't follow the calling because they're worried of a thing that, in the rare case that it actually happened, wouldn't be that big of a fucking deal. So another angle on business, I think businesses get associated as with money, as like money machines. And to some extent, kinda, but I think of them very differently. I think of businesses as mission machines. If I have a calling and there's this thing that I want to chase, this problem that I want to solve, well, I can find other people that care about that calling too. Like have maybe not the exact same calling, but at least compatible ones. And if all of us get together and work on this together, that's a business. So like the way that I put like money into the equation is it's a road trip and money is gas. No road trip has been about making sure that we got as much gas as possible, that we're being super gas efficient. It's still a consideration. And if you don't pay attention to that, you're either not going to get where you want to go, you're going to get stranded somewhere. But you may need to continue to put gas in the car, but it's not the point. The point is to chase the mission. Very different view of what businesses are. And they can be big, they can be small, but like I saw somebody beating somebody up on Twitter, some VC, about how small their company was. I was Basecamp. I was like, well, I won't be taking advice from a $30 million year of revenue company. And like Jason Friedman and DHH, I think that they're doing exactly what they want to do. I think they are pursuing their calling. And so likewise with us. We can do that on our own. We can do that in twosies. We can do that in organizations of all size. Fuck, some of you on the call worked with me on Develop Denver. That was a business that lost $25,000, and I'm honestly not all that mad about it. We pursued our mission of connecting and educating the technology community in Denver. I don't know, we did that, and feels great. That's a business. So when you're looking for people with compatible callings, I kind of need to get back into this coercion thing, is you can't coerce people to chase your mission. One of the things we understand about pyramids now is like the narrative for a very long time, slaves built the pyramids. And now we know that's impossible, in part because the pyramids are too fucking good. People that you coerce into doing work don't do good work. I'll bet there are a lot of you who kicked ass in this program and did not kick ass in school. You can't coerce somebody into like caring about something. But if they do care about something and you get the fuck out of their way, you kind of can't stop them. So like I was thinking about what things need to be in place for that to happen. Once you have like your folks together who have compatible callings, you're interested in chasing the same mission. Like, what do we need to be able to see things clearly, to work with truth? And I think one of them is that you need to be able to try things without getting punished. Not everything's going to work, and that's okay. There are a lot of things that we did with y'all as students that were just not hits. They were good ideas, but they were worth trying. Didn't actually end up working out okay. And so this is one of the purposes of the daily surveys, is we can monitor that stuff and go, nope, never mind. Good idea, bad execution, or just like there's some other factor that we weren't considering. And if you can do that and not be in trouble, I think about lessons that I've done, everybody on the staff has done, that were just not hits. If you're scared of that happening, especially if you're scared of reprisal for that, like you start playing it too safe. Now you're not chasing the mission anymore. Now you're not pursuing your calling. Now you're trying to not get in trouble. That's fucking dumb. Bad use of energy. That's one of the things that needs to be in place. You need to be able to ask for feedback without being worried about it. So daily surveys, good example of that. Some of you guys tore us apart in those surveys. They weren't necessarily wrong, but as soon as you can do that without worrying that like we're not going to be friends anymore, that it makes things weird. And this is one of the things that happens when you do annual reviews or something. That's the frequency with which you're getting feedback. Now it has weight. Now it's scary. What the fuck are you going to say to me? If we're talking every day, if we're giving each other feedback every day, sometimes there's not much to say. Sometimes I just want to personally thank you so much for this thing. It's like, hey man, like I know you're having an off day, but like I really didn't appreciate when you said this to me. If this is a conversation we're always having, now it's kind of not a big deal. And if we're not afraid of getting in trouble for trying something, now we can actually grow something together. You need to be safe to be wrong. It also needs to be safe to be right. If somebody nails it with something, comes up with a cool idea, something that we should chase, we can't like ignore that because it wasn't the boss's idea. Or because, we already started this other thing. So it needs to be safe to be right also. And I think that the last thing that needs to be in place, and this is probably the most foreign thing. All of these things, there are some like work environments that are like that. This one's a little bit more rare. The people doing the work need to own the work 100%. Meaning we own how it's done, the tools that we use. If we don't like those tools, if we don't like these processes, we can change them. If something fucks up, if something's a hit, we own all of that. We will stand in front of our customers, our users, and like we'll take the darts. Negative feedback, we will own that. We'll also take praise. We'll take positive feedback. It's not always the case that like instructors, even at like these kinds of schools, ever get like honest, direct feedback from students. Like, that feels nuts to me. That they don't have to stand up there and go like, I taught a really bad lesson. Sorry about that. They also don't get like the praise when like you do something that really affects somebody. That's a tragedy, man. I think it's like, when you think about animals, complexity of their brains has like a direct map to like how much love they're like actually capable of. So like the amount of love that a dog like has to offer, more than what a hamster has to offer. And then like a human, like a step more than that too. Similar thing with humans and like being under the influence of substances. You can't selectively dull an emotion. You can't just dull your rage or something like that. If you dull your rage, you also dull your joy. Like those things just kind of, they're proportional. And so being afraid of getting in trouble for making a rough product or something like that, or just having a bad day, that also robs you of your joy of like when you hit a home run. And so I'm going to dovetail this into software, but I'm going to pause there for a sec. Questions about any of the business stuff that I just talked about? What you got?
Do you know of a good method to find people with compatible callings?
The biggest one is to be open to it. And one of the things that I noticed, I don't think anybody on this team, certainly not the team that was originally hired here at Flatiron, necessarily like knew that this was their calling. And I don't know that all of them, if I told them all this batshit crazy stuff that I'm saying right now, if they would have gone in on that right away. Instead, what I did was, hey gang, what if we did this? What if we didn't do code challenges this way? I'd like to try this thing. It's called a stand-up. And we're going to do this kind of like silly thing at the end. It's clapping. Humor me on it for a little bit. And just trying those things, having that out there attracted people who were like, yes, I like the direction this is going in. More of that, please. And then people who are like, this is fucking stupid. I don't care about any of this. Kind of sorted themselves out. And it wasn't even like acrimonious or anything. They're like, this is not my calling. I'm kind of not into this. Exact same thing happened at Galvanize. That team at the end, that was a team of the truest believers that ever were. It didn't start that way though. Like a lot of the original people, just not into it. We were trying stuff. And the more stuff we tried and the more stuff we were like, yeah, this, that kind of sorted itself out. And pretty much everything in my life that I've done, Develop Denver, same thing. The original staff of Develop Denver, not all of them were into this approach to running the organization. And so they moved on. And more people who saw what we were doing wanted to get involved with it, including the bartender at the place where we had our staff meetings. He came up to me one night. We'd been going there like probably twice a month for like 6-month period for like 2 years. And after like a year, he comes up to me and he goes, what are you guys doing? He like didn't actually know like what our organization did. And then he just asked like, can I be a part of it? Like, hell yeah, man. When you see other people who are chasing a calling, it gets very attractive. This is literally the law of attraction. And so you start wanting to be a part of it too. And so a lot of it can start with you. Try something. other people, if they're into it, slowly but surely, they'll start gravitating toward that. Or like you don't need to start it. You see other people who just have the kind of environment you want to be a part of. Ask if you can be a part of it. One more question about business stuff. All right. So, last thing, the tech things. So one of the biggest challenges we have to chasing a mission and creating the kind of culture that we want to have is to not treat people like machines, to not coerce them, to not carrot and stick them, to honor their callings, to honor them as humans. And there has been a long history of control versus freedom and technology in particular, but like business culture overall. So I've charted it out here. Really, like, I think the first motherfucker in business was Frederick Taylor. So Frederick Taylor was the father of scientific management. He worked in a factory in the late 19th century. And he was the first guy who told the people who owned the factory, you know what, if you put me in charge, I can get these people to actually work. And so they did it, and he ended up founding this thing called scientific management. It's not science, like, in any way. He's trying to like prove the most optimal way to do this. And like, there's some of like literal Taylorism that's still used today, like UPS drivers. Well, no, you do this, and with this hand, you turn this key, and then you move the key to your other hand, and then you put it in your pocket, and then you step out of the truck with your right foot. So that's scientific management. And he had a whole cavalcade of acolytes, like Henry Gantt. That's where like the predictive Gantt charts come from. The idea of giving bonuses to people who do a real good job, even though there are all kinds of external factors, like your sort of tool for psychologically terrorizing your staff. The idea of a bureaucracy, that was another Taylor acolyte. McKinsey was another Taylor acolyte. This idea that like, oh no, we plan out how much money we're going to spend ahead of time and then make everything kind of fit that. So this, at the very beginning of the 20th century, we start pushing back on that a little bit. There's a philosopher named C.I. Lewis, not C.S. Lewis, C.I. Lewis, who brought in pragmatism. So pragmatism, we mentioned it earlier, acknowledging that we are using science as a lens on reality, but it's not reality itself. And so that the tools that we use them for our purposes, but like we pick what those purposes are. And his acolytes, especially Shewart and Deming, were all about controlling the work. All of these are about controlling people. This is about controlling the work. So like a control chart, if you've never seen one, are for machines. You have two lines, and you take readings on them every day, before every shift, once a week. And what will happen is that's the reading of the first shift, second shift, third shift, fourth shift. And then at some point it becomes out of control. And that's how you know that like a part needs to be replaced. But that's not controlling the people, that's controlling the work, that's controlling the machine. And most important part, this is the thread running through all of the people on the left, is that this work was owned by the people. The reason we did control charts wasn't because the boss said so, it's because we don't want the fucking machine to break. The people doing the work also don't want the machine to break. So this was a tool that they came up with. This came from the factory floor. In the Agile Manifesto, things like stand-ups, pair programming, test-driven development. This wasn't shit that the bosses came up with. This was software engineers, just like you and me, who were tired of being controlled, who were tired of stack ranking, who were tired of SSAD, who were tired of waterfall, and said, okay, can we just control our own work? And they came up with these practices. They came up with these rituals to help themselves work better. That's freedom. And I think that so many of these, so like Holacracy is another great example of kind of an unstructured organization. So if management hierarchy is, all right, I have the following 7 reports and each of them has the following 7 reports. Holacracy is, these are the things that the businesses is doing right now. Vote with your feet, man. What do you want to be a part of? And so you'd be in like 3 different holes. So if like, this is the company has these like major areas here, and you personally might be in this one, or that one, this one, and this one. And then, you know what? They don't really need me over here anymore. And so then they leave. Valve software management structure, very similar. What games do you work on? What games do you want to work on? So one of the reasons like there is no Portal 3, the reason there is no Half-Life 3, people have started those, and then everybody walked away from them eventually because the games weren't any fucking good. That's why Valve's hit rate is so high on quality games. Would you rather have Half-Life 3 if it sucked? So like the dangers of just the chaos of this are vastly overstated. The real danger is that you make a shitty product. The real danger is that you hurt people. The real danger is that when the engineers are telling you that the O-rings aren't able to function when it's this cold outside, the real danger is that you blow up the fucking rocket. That comes from this illusion of control. So traditionally, with technology, we go the other side. We get tough on people. We get strict with them. And then we get loosey-goosey as hell with the tech stuff. So this is one of the reasons that the people on the left wanted to have TDD and pairing and all these things. These were quality practices. The saying, I believe this comes from the military. It might also come from martial arts. Doesn't matter. It is just true. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. When we're in control, like using the control chart terminology, when our tests are green, when this code has been seen by just about everybody on the team, it's been touched by just about everybody on the team today. We're going slow, but now it's smooth. Now we don't run into the problem where in 2 weeks, in a month, in a year, we need to change direction. And we go, well, fuck, all the code was written with this other expectation. We go, okay, fine, we'll just rip that part of it out. Well, we can't rip that part of it out because it's spidered through this entire thing. You have some class or some module, and you need to modify it, but you don't know what else it might be used on. So then you make a copy of it, and then you just add your thing. And then somebody else makes a copy out of it that subtracts a couple of things. And we go, oh, we need to change something. And then only ever actually gets changed on this one. And now these 2 things break. And so then you spend a year tracking that down. That's how you end up with shitty software. That gets in your way of pursuing the calling, of pursuing the mission. That's why this level of attention to detail and the tech stuff matters. It's how we're chasing the mission. It's how we're pursuing our calling. Also, like for anybody curious, that's what's extreme about it too. And extreme programming, the very unfortunately named agile methodology, is that taking complete ownership of your work and having relentless attention to detail is extreme. But it's also beautiful and allows us to see clearly and like allows us to really learn the truth. So there's two conclusions that I have for this that hopefully I've made a strong enough case for. The first thing is you need to understand that you are powerful. You control your reasoned choice, and that's a lot. That is a ton. You choose whether or not you do this work. You choose whether or not you do it this way. Even if somebody's trying to coerce you, it's your choice whether or not you are coerced. Now, that's all you control. Turns out that's just about all you need. You're powerful, but you are not in control. You don't control outcomes. You don't control other people's perceptions. You don't control whether or not other people try to coerce you. You control your choices. You have full ownership over those. Even if it's a shitty choice that you don't want to have to make, it is your choice, and that is a ton of power. Product launch didn't hit. Company went out of business. Boss is a dick. You don't control any of those things. All you control is your reaction to them. And so the final thought that I want to leave you with on this is that how do we do this stuff? How do we make these things real? Start by believing they're possible. Because if you start becoming like a cynic, if you go, yeah, but out here in the real world, oh, not in my company, not with my boss. Now you're abdicating your power. You're giving up. That's a choice, but you need to be very clear that that is the choice that you are making. You are choosing to believe that that's not possible. And one of the reasons I didn't open with this on day one of the school is that you kind of got to see it. You've seen it. You know that it's possible to run an organization this way. You know that it's possible to learn things this way. You know it's possible to build software this way. So once you start there, once you start believing that this is possible, not some fantasy land bullshit that old man Coberly's quacking about, then you just try some stuff. You act as if it were already true. You act as if your team already valued these things. And what I've noticed is that more often than not, people want to live in this world. People want to see things clearly and talk about them honestly. People want to work with other people that are chasing the same mission. People want to have a calling. People want to make good products. People want to do quality work that they're proud of. That's huge. That's so big. And once you invite them into that, once you invite them into what I learned in school as a bubble of excellence from like one of my very few not bullshit classes, it's like, all right, well, if this is the company, yeah, you all by yourself, you're probably not going to change the company. But you can create a little bubble of excellence inside of it. And then your little bubble of excellence that lives in this world, that plays by these rules, you can grow it a little bit more. Let's say you add Mark Major. Mark Major's inside the bubble now. And then you add Angelo. And then you add Dane. And Brian's in here. And Damon's in here. Ahmed's in here. And at some point, your little bubble subsumes the organization. Now it is the organization. I was explaining this exact concept to Brian 2 years ago, and he got so excited about it. And he ran out to the students and said, "You guys, we live in a little love bubble of excellence." It's literally where the term comes from. Doesn't always work. Sometimes the bubble pops. I'm not in control. We don't control whether or not the bubble grows, shrinks, subsumes the organization, or pops outright. It's not a thing we get to pick. But we do get to pick whether or not we try to build it in the first place. And I have never regretted trying to build a love bubble with you guys. That's it. Thank you.
Hey, can everybody just unmute and clap real fast?
We love you, Kyle.
All right. So questions, thoughts, we'll do it for a little bit, and then we got to get off to project presentations and shit. But what's on your mind?
Fuck corporate America, be passionate, love what you do.
Sorry, say the question again.
I was just making comments. I came off of a 12-year career with a company, which is really just a series of jobs that I held within the company. So I really appreciate everything you've had to say today. It very much hit home with me because I'm super excited to just start pursuing passion and really kind of go back to that calling that you were talking about. So yeah, corporate America kind of beat that out of me. So I'm super happy.
Cool. Well, fucking beat truth back into corporate America, man.
Kyle,
What else? Yep.
if you could suggest one book to everybody here, what would you suggest?
Oh shoot, that's a good one. So if like the education stuff was clicking with you, To Know As We Are Known by Parker Palmer, like this is the deepest philosophy there is on education. For the tech stuff, like being focused on quality, XP Explained by Kent Beck is probably a good go-to. And then for kind of understanding business more the way that I'm talking about it, I would anything in this series, but the first one's a fine place to start. This is Building a Better Business. The series is called A Lapsed Anarchist's Approach To. So it's this guy named Ari Weinsweig who runs a chain of restaurants and stuff in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And like, I've never seen somebody like get it more than that dude.
Perfect. Thanks, man.
Yep.
And thanks for the whole thing. That was awesome.
Awesome. I'm glad.
I just kind of want to add to what's been said so far. I dropped out of college whenever COVID hit because, you know, I knew that I could do it. I knew that like I was like physically able to do the work, but I just didn't enjoy it, you know. I was trying to find like what I wanted to do with my life. And that's kind of what I took a shot with this boot camp with Flatiron. It's been an amazing change to my life. I kind of realized some of the things that you also said, like, you know, like you can be passionate about things. Like it's good to be passionate about things. And so I just want to say thanks for, you know, being so real, like really knowing that, you know, like it is a choice, you know, like you can do what you want. And then, you know, you being real with us and like, you know, setting up this entire program has really shown me that I can also do it. So I just want to say thanks.
Hell yeah, dude. No, okay. So this is called the Law of Reciprocity. I've noticed this over and over again also. As soon as you start getting real with people, you're inviting them to be real with you also. And I have worked with countless business people who are like, and a good business morning to you. It is a good business morning indeed. Did you review the agenda for the meeting at 11 o'clock? I have not yet, but I shall before, like that kind of shit. And then you say shit all of a sudden, and now we're like pals. Now we're getting real. And so, or like we go, man, we really did a bad job today. And as soon as like you break that ice, not everybody jumps on it. In fact, like I've absolutely had in my career people that like turn on you for that. They go, ah, yes, indeed, it is a shitty day. Adult minder, get him in trouble. He's pissed, he's negative. So like that's happened to me also. You don't control that, but like I said, I've never regretted being real with people. Is more often than not, like they're dying to do it also.
Kyle, first off, just thank you for this and for everything. Second, if you could have a billboard, you could put it anywhere you want.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you put it and what would it say?
It would. I would put a billboard. By the way, the thing I'm doing right now, it's an interview strategy. You do it in your tech interviews also. Repeat back a question as slowly as possible. It buys you time to think of an answer. The place I would put a billboard is on top of my house, so that nobody else could take it down. And the billboard on top of my house would say, Scott, 3 letters. Just fucking, I'm bringing it back, baby. That's how I'll let people know that Ska isn't dead and I'll live at the Ska house. And then it'll be really easy to tell people where I live. It's like, yeah, I live in the Ska house. And like, so when I lived in Seattle, like I did have like a big, like Walt Jabsco 2-tone poster in my window. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I can't think of a better one, but yeah, my off the cuff answer, Ska, SKA, baby.
I don't really have a question, it's more of a comment. So about 2 months ago, so like in the middle of course, I somehow had the sort of this revelation about how, because so I when I was a kid, I was a very naive, sheltered, like Bible kid, right? Like that was like the core. And then went off to college and had a bunch of very different experiences, sort of driving me away from all of that stuff. Like how do I bridge the gap between this is the objective reality, right? And this is, faith is the evidence of things unseen. Like how do I make that bridge?
Sure.
And it occurred to me about 2 months ago in the middle of the course with you that the difference is approach. When you approach this thing as a like in faith, like this is a real thing, approach it like it's real.
Yes.
Then that starts becoming the objective reality.
Yes. Well, and like Parker Palmer is like a minister. And like so when he's talking about truth, is like the facts are part of the truth. They're just not the entire truth. We are also a part of the truth, and our interactions with it are all part of that. And it's kind of a tragedy that faith and storytelling and a lot of these other things that are very critical to understanding like a capital T truth, since they're not provable, like anything's provable, then we throw them away. And like, I think we've gone too far in that direction. And just because something is subjective doesn't mean that it's not capital T true. And so it's not to ignore the like objective reality that we learn, which again is just facts that we're imposing a lens on. It's to reconcile that with like, okay, what is my purpose? Like, show me the fucking null hypothesis for that. And like so many of these things are like n=1 kinds of experiments that we're constantly doing. So there is no like broader thing that we can take out of that. That doesn't mean it's worthless. In fact, like I think that that's where the most important things are. And we have so many tools like ethics and like other branches of philosophy that are helping us try to get to that truth, of which our objective facts are like one dimension of. Cool. One more.
I'm going to jump in. You kind of talked about this already, but I think the hardest part for me is the fear Because
Yeah.
it's like, I'm not afraid of getting fired per se. I'm more afraid of like, what about the people who are going to criminalize me for these things? You know, the people who are actually going to come at me and take action against me, like following their mission, but in a way that they don't want. Like, what would you say to that? Like that fear, like, how do you handle that?
So one of the things that helps with fear is like let some bad things happen to you. Like, or at least just don't like aggressively try to like anesthetize yourself to them. I'll give you a pretty tame example. I the first time I missed a flight at the airport, that started me down this thing. Because you know what happened? I went to the desk and I said, I missed my flight. And you know what they did? They put me on another one in like an hour. It's like not a big deal at all. It's like, I don't know. I thought that like they executed you or something if like you like didn't make the flight. And then I remember missing a flight and they didn't have another flight. So I just had to go back home. And you know what I did? I got on one the next day. It was like just kind of a nothing burger. And then that happened to me in a strange city. Like I was going to Tennessee and then Sacramento and then like back home to Las Vegas or something. And I missed a connecting flight and I had to sleep in the airport. And you know what? Kind of not that big a deal. And the worst thing that ever happened to me in an airport was I had just checked in my rental car and left everything in it. I had no ID. I had no money. I had nothing. And so like flight's gonna leave in an hour and a half, and I'm going to security. And I was like, I have nothing. Can I still go home? and what they did was they looked up my driver's license in Colorado and looked at my picture and like searched me. There's no whole lot to search. I didn't have anything. And I got on the plane and went home. Like, so that's an example of when these terrible, like the worst thing that could possibly happen actually happens, and you see that, all right, it's probably something you want to avoid, but it's probably not worth the amount of avoidance that just the energy you throw into avoiding it. You know, I'd sure prefer that wouldn't happen. So I'm gonna like spot check my keys before I drop off the rental car thing next time. But it's not like, and so that's why I added this little hook to my arm that I put the keys on, so I make sure that I always have them because I never want that to happen to me again. And so like I've been fired probably 30 times in my life. There was a period of my life where I got fired a lot. And it was just like not actually that bad. Not a thing that I want to happen, but I think that that's how you let that fear not control you anymore. And that was like another part of that Stoic reading that I was doing this morning, is if you actively think about what all the bad possibilities are, like the cynics believed that everything that could happen bad will happen bad. The Stoics said everything bad that could happen might happen. And so you spend some time thinking about like, what will that actually be like? Because when you act out of fear, like you kind of fuck yourself twice. Both whatever the negative thing is, and you're like shock and surprise over it. So it's in your power to get rid of one of those. If you like play through, all right, what happens if I miss the flight? What happens if I get a negative 40 or whatever on my performance review? What if these things actually come to pass? What am I going to do? What if I'm doing my capstone presentation and my internet goes out? Like, and what I've found is that most of the time you go, okay, well, nothing that like won't be forgotten in a month. And fuck, like, you know what? That might actually even be better. Or like, it'll be such a nothing burger that like, why would I let that change anything that I was already planning on doing? So yeah, that's my advice. Miss some flights. Cool. So thank you all very much for coming to Cash Culture and Violence. Let's take 5 minutes and then we'll get into some project presentations. So let's call it 2:45, hop into some project presentations. Thank you all very much for letting me chat at you.
We love you, Kyle.
I love you too.